Okay, so I got a treat for you guys today. Recently, I was on a podcast called Searching for Grog. It's done by these guys called the Pasion Brothers. It's a bunch of brothers and cousins and all sorts of friends. And it's a really nerdy podcast, but they have one goal. And their goal is to find the voice who did the Colossus roar in the X-Men game. I love it. I love everything about the premise. I said, I want to be a part of this process. I want to help get the word out. I want to figure out how we can find the voice actor for the Colossus roar. We've all heard the Colossus roar in the X-Men arcade game. We've all heard that. We've all seen it. And it's all become a big part of gaming lexicon. My involvement here is back in the old MAGfest days. I actually played a small part in getting that off the ground and that becoming a big part of MAGfest and the culture associated with that event, which is now one of the bigger events out on the East Coast in the gaming world. With that said, that's going to go into that further on this podcast. I thought about chopping it up, but I asked the Pasion Brothers if I could actually post the entire episode on my channel, and I encourage you to listen to this entire thing. It's about 30, 45 minutes long. Just pop it on in the background. There's no video to go along with it, but just listen to it. Listen to the stories associated with it. I think the podcast is phenomenal. It talks about Brendan, who was one of the original guys who got MAGfest really off the ground. The second guy who kind of ran it and brought Screw Attack in for the first time. Without Brendan, X-Men wouldn't have been there. Without Brendan, Screw Attack wouldn't have been there. So the Colossus roar wouldn't have been a thing. Anyways, you'll hear the whole story. I encourage you to listen to it. I also encourage you to go find their podcast. I have links down in the description for you. And I just want you to sit back and enjoy this because I thought you guys would really just savor the story associated with this. And if I can help get the word out about finding this, whoever this voice actor is, I will gladly do it, and I'm doing my part now. Once again, hit the thumbs up button. Of course, subscribe to my channel if you enjoy this classic retro stuff and, video game culture as a whole. I greatly appreciate it. And of course, go find Searching for Grog from the Pasion Brothers. I greatly appreciate it. Now enjoy this.
You're listening to Searching for Grog. I'm Adam Pasion in Nagoya, and I'm here with Evan Pasion. Say what's up.
What's up, people?
And we got Booney here, a.k.a. Brandon Pasion. What's up, Booney?
Hey.
Unfortunately, the titular Grog is not here to join us today, but that's okay because today we're not really going to be going on down the main mission kind of path. We are going to go down a side path. So if you remember from a few episodes back, Brandon, we talked about the Colossus roar at MAGfest. Yeah. And you guys actually went to MAGwest. You didn't find it there. But I thought that was a really interesting path to explore just because, this became so much more than what we initially thought it would be, right? We thought it was just going to be us doing this funny voice. And we didn't realize that it was something that everybody does in some certain part of the world. So Evan and I went in search of the originator of this Colossus meme at MAGfest. So that's kind of the story that I want to tell you today. And we talked to a couple different people, and I'm going to play some clips and just kind of tell the story of how this Colossus roar became a thing at MAGfest.
All right.
So as I think I told you a few episodes back, initially I talked to the founder of MAGfest. His name is Joseph Yamin, but he actually only directed the festival for that first year, and then he stepped away. And so the person that he passed it on to was a guy named Brendan Becker, and Brendan Becker was actually more or less involved in MAGfest from the very beginning, but yeah, he took it over right after the very first event.
It would have been in 2002, almost immediately after the first event.
Before I go on and tell you his involvement in MAGfest, he was just like a totally fascinating person. Evan, I'm sure you can agree.
Yeah, he had a lot of knowledge in the area, and he's like done a little bit of everything. He seems like the kind of person who when they're interested in something, they go all the way.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, so I was going to say something very similar to what you just said, which is that, and I don't think he would mind me saying this, he's a total nerd. And I mean that in like the Chris Hardwick sense of the word. So which is his definition of nerd is it's not about the things that you like, it's about how you like them and like how passionate you are and how like, single-minded you can be about a particular thing. And he just goes in deep. He goes hard on like everything that he likes. So, for example, just kind of the way that he got involved in MAGfest in the first place, he was a really big fan of just like Linux programming in the first place.
Back in the day, I was a real Linux nerd. I guess I still am. But I had, told everyone, well, a Linux solution can be written. If it doesn't exist, I had to eat my words a little bit. People were like, oh, well, you can't play Dance Dance in Linux.
So that was the challenge that was given to him. You can't play Dance Dance in Linux. And he decided to rise to the challenge. And so he actually kind of hand-coded a Linux kind of based, or I think he wrote it in Python. He wrote his own kind of clone of Dance Dance Revolution.
And I was like, all right, I'm just going to write Dance Dance Revolution from scratch so that I can play it in Linux. So I did. And went to MAGfest as one of the first places that I would show it off. Like I felt like it was ready for prime time.
Wait, he wrote a version of Dance Dance Revolution from scratch.
Yeah. And if you can picture this, there was a Dance Dance Revolution machine at the first MAGfest, and right next to it, he set up his little computer and like configured a little pad to the ports there, and he was doing his own version of it in Linux using like songs by the mini bosses and stuff.
That's crazy.
So that was MAGfest 1. And so that's the kind of guy that he is. And I think I mentioned on the previous episode that he is also like, he's a musician and that he does a lot of chiptunes kind of music, 8-bit kind of stuff. But it's not just like he's, a hobbyist kind of writing these little chiptunes and throwing them up on SoundCloud or something like that. Like he makes these kind of laborious tributes and stuff like that using like real hardware, like 8-bit machines. And he pressed one of his albums on vinyl.
So then I started doing tributes and made myself famous with an album called Pretty Hate Machine on 8 different 8-bits.
And then this album actually got real public attention, including Trent Reznor himself from Nine Inch Nails.
Yeah, I got an email with subject line "Wow" from Trent Reznor, and he was like, "I can tell you put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. This is fucking amazing. It was really cool."
Oh my god.
Yeah, so he like I said, like when he goes for something, he goes hard. Like he's really into game preservation and preserving old rare hardware. But I don't mean it like he's one of those guys who has a bunch of weird systems in his basement. Like he literally has started a museum.
And about 5 years ago, I made friends with a museum just north of Baltimore called the System Source Computer Museum. And they allowed me to install exhibits and do work and store my stuff up here. So my museum is called the Bloop Museum.
Yeah, so he has a museum called the Bloop Museum. So if anybody's there in that Baltimore area, definitely go and check it out. But anyway, so like I said, he's a really fascinating guy, and he sent me down all these weird YouTube rabbit holes and stuff after the fact because I was just really fascinated in some of the stuff he was talking about. But back to how he is related to, how he connects to MAGfest. So, I knew that he had taken over MAGfest from Joseph Yamin, but I didn't know that he actually saved MAGfest. In other words, if it wasn't for him, MAGfest would not have existed. And this goes back to what I said about his passion for stuff, is that when he found out that it was going to close, he decided to kind of single-handedly save this festival.
I think I ended up going to People 411 or something like that, and found the organizer's phone number and called them up, and I was like, you can't do this.
So this next part of the story is where I think his nerdiness shines, because it sounds like straight out of a plot from like Stranger Things or something. He literally called up an emergency meeting of like the science fiction fantasy club.
I was like, well, hold on, I'll call you back. And I call back, I'll call up all these people. And I got together like an emergency meeting of the science fiction fantasy club.
You called in the big guns.
Yeah.
You don't mess around with them.
Yeah, I imagine he lit some sort of beacon. It's like Gondor calls for aid, and they all assembled like in his basement.
Yeah, exactly. It's just so cool. Like, honestly, like if you could imagine just being in that headspace where like this event that you went to was just so fun, and you couldn't imagine it not happening again, that you're going to like do whatever it takes to save it. It's just really, I love that kind of passion that he has for this. So yeah, he ended up taking it over. He actually even paid out some of the business debts and stuff.
The long and short of it is, he was like, well, you do it. It's like, oh, I guess it's mine now. So
that's how he took it over.
Yeah. And I would say, honestly, like I think that he really, just talking to him and the kind of things that he's interested in, the kind of atmosphere that he was going for, I would say that he really played a huge part in like creating the mood and atmosphere of what MAGfest became. And that's kind of what makes it so appealing to everybody, right? Is that, this kind of feeling that you're just hanging out with friends and all connecting and nerding out about stuff that you love. And I definitely think that that's his kind of DNA there in the festival. So going back to how this pertains to our quest of looking for the Colossus roar, if you remember, Evan, how is it that you even found out about the Colossus roar at MAGfest? Do you remember?
Yeah, I remember I was looking on YouTube and just kind of going down that rabbit hole, searching different videos. And there was a video called something like The Origin of the Colossus Roar, The History of the Colossus Roar. And it was a clip from MAGfest of someone sort of talking about what had started that at MAGfest. And so then from there, I had to kind of go backwards and say, well, what is MAGfest? What is this Colossus Roar that they're doing? And that's kind of how we backed into it.
Sure. So if you remember in that video, if you listen really carefully, they gave the credit for this roar to somebody named Stuttering Craig, aka Craig Skistimus, from a podcast and a whole like kind of network of podcasts called Screw Attack, which was really big back in the kind of early 2000s. So we actually went straight to the source and decided to ask Craig himself if he remembers starting this, and his response was,
"They're not wrong."
So we had a really fun talk with Craig. He was a great guest, and in fact, I feel like it's almost a waste for me just to kind of put clips in this because I want to just play the whole thing. But there's two things I want to say about Craig before we go on to kind of talk about his role in this X-Men Colossus Roar thing. First thing was, he was, I was a little bit nervous about getting a hold of him, to be honest, because I thought like, he's a pretty big name in the video game podcast scene and stuff. And what's he going to think of our stupid little show? But actually, he was really, really into the idea of the show.
This is legitimately the best premise for a podcast I've ever heard in my life. It's outstanding.
Yeah. And I was like, well, yeah, I just like how we're dedicating so much of our time to such a stupid little premise. And he said,
worthless. Like, this is legitimately all I care about right now. like, you guys have hooked me in, and all I want to do is help you in your cause.
So that was really awesome. The other thing that I thought was really, really funny about talking to him is that, if you remember, we were all kind of joking about this voice actually being somebody in the mailroom at Konami. And he actually just posited his own guess. Totally, we didn't even ask him to. And here's what he guessed.
Hunting down the guy is going to be ridiculously tough. But because I think it's just going to be some random guy, some janitor or something.
That would line up with our experience so far.
Yeah. Like janitor is as close to mailroom as you get, I think, as far as like the hierarchy of the company. So yeah. So anyway, Craig, we asked him if he was the person who was responsible for the Colossus roar at MAGfest, because that's what what YouTube kind of claimed. And here's what he told us.
Very early in the Screw Attack days, this was 2006, 2007. 2007, I think, was our first MAGfest that we went to. And we were invited to go out there, and we thought that would be like really fun to do. We'd never been to a convention as a group before. And
so, yeah, they had been invited to go there. And actually, so we asked Brendan, too, if he remembers it that way. And he more or less confirmed that it was Craig, although he did think that there were some other people there and he could remember some of their names as well.
There's a band called Chromlodian, who's also known as Sprite Slowdown, Auto Scroll, Cheap Dinosaurs. Like, it's all kind of an iteration on the same band. And Ryan Soloby kind of headed up that band. And I think it was kind of both of them.
So when he says both of them here, he means Ryan Soloby, the head of that band, and Craig Skistimus. So those two people were both really instrumental in getting this to go. But before I tell you the story of how that happened, if you ask me, I would say that Brendan himself is just as responsible for this, because he was the reason that there was an X-Men cabinet there in the first place.
So this was, roughly speaking, it was either MAGfest 6 or MAGfest 7. We had gotten a 6-player dual-screen X-Men cabinet from my friend Charles Margolis, may he rest in peace.
So at this time, they didn't like contract a vendor to like supply all of their stuff. It was literally just trading stuff. If somebody had a game in their basement, they would be like, hey, we'll give you free tickets to the show if you let us play if you put your arcade cabinet on the floor. And so that was how they were doing most of their video games. But this X-Men cabinet was a different story, actually.
But the X-Men machine was a different story. This became ours. And Charles Margolis traded this X-Men machine, which he had to get rid of. It ends up being mine, and I gave it to the event.
So that's why I think that Brendan is really crucial in this, because if it hadn't been for him, the game wouldn't have been there. And if it hadn't been there, obviously nobody would have played it. So anyway, so in the early days of MAGfest, the guys from Screw Attack, they're invited to come. And even as early as the first MAGfest, one of the really important attractions was the arcade selection. That was one thing that made it stand out from other game festivals.
Part of what made MAGfest really appealing to me was the arcade game selection that they had. I think the arcade games are the great uniter.
And I love that quote, arcade games are the great uniter, because that's kind of like this underlying theme of our show.
Yeah.
But yeah, for sure. And so he was really, really into just the idea that they were going to have all these games there. And so, of course, among these is this 6-player X-Men. And that game is just, first of all, it's huge. But second of all, it's so loud.
Stuff is just kind of warming up or whatever. But the X-Men machine is on, and it is loud.
And that was part of what made these games really, they drew you in. There's a setting in all these arcade games that's called attract noise. And that's the whole idea, is to pull these dumb kids towards the games and pop their quarters in so the people who bought them can make money.
I'm just thinking of the fact that arcade games used a setting called attract noise.
Yeah.
I kind of wonder what now, because that's basically moved to like YouTube and online gaming and stuff. And it makes me wonder what psychology they're using to try to, addict kids to like YouTube videos and that kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
It's just crazy to think,
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, there's a lot of science to it behind like the stupid little ads. And I've noticed, you notice the mobile game ads you get. It's like they follow a couple formulas. Like one of them, it's always like the person playing it in the ad, like doing horribly wrong. And you're like, no, like I could totally do that.
Yeah.
There's got to be some psychology there that like they found that hooks people in.
If you can do this in 10 moves, you're a genius.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, I could do it.
I do think that the old ones, there's a kind of a pure simplicity to it, like an analog simplicity to it. It's just like, make it look cool, make it have a weird shape and bright colors, and have loud noises. It was like, I don't know if there's much psychology involved. Anyway, so people go over there and they start gathering around this 6-player X-Men machine.
We're playing as Dazzler and all these other, characters and Wolverine and whatever. But then you hit Colossus and Grog, right? And it trumps all the music in the game. Every single sound effect in the game, the Colossus yell takes precedent over everything. It's so much louder, it's so much more ridiculous, and it's a great soundbite.
That's a good point. I never really considered that it was the loudest thing in the whole game.
Yeah. It's the loudest thing in the game, and that game is the loudest thing in the arcade. So, and it's such an iconic sound also in the first place. Like there's only a few things that are that iconic. In fact, Craig actually sort of talked about that a little bit.
There's certain sounds that resonate with people who grew up in arcades. The Colossus yell, the elephants from Street Fighter. If you were to walk through an arcade, you could find these games based off of the,
As soon as he said that, I imagined that level where you're playing against Dalsim and you hear the elephants that, That's totally not the one I would have come up with, but I was really glad that that's what he came up with. So
there's elephant sounds in the X-Men game, right? Or at least there are on the sound chip, but I don't know what level it would be from.
I thought those were monkeys, but they might be elephants.
Yeah, when you're like pulling the sound clips, there's one that's an elephant sound, but it doesn't sound that distinct in the game, but it's strange that they had that in there.
Yeah. So one of the things that sort of makes this story really, one kind of important detail is that these games are all on free play, which actually makes kind of an important difference.
Of course, what do you do in X-Men? Punch, kick, jump, use your mutant power. And if you aren't limited on quarters, you use your mutant power quite a bit.
So that aspect, the fact that you can just push that as much as you want, means that they're not worried at all about losing lives.
And had you had to put in quarters and credits, then this never would have happened, because when you have free credits, you can use the power up as much as you want, because you're not, you have no, usually it takes life away. If my memory is correct, it takes life away every time you use the power up. So we have infinite power ups.
Yeah. So these guys, obviously they have infinite power ups, as he said. And so they're just going to town. They're not holding back at all. And they are just making this machine howl.
And so, whoever was on Colossus, which I think was possibly Craig at one point and was possibly Ryan Soloby at another point, they were just going to town on the mutant power button, constantly getting it to roar at it.
So, of course, then every time that the machine yells at them, they actually start to yell back at the machine.
So we've had a few drinks, and we keep doing the Colossus in the game, and eventually, it just becomes a thing. You're hanging out with your buddies, and you've had a few, and you're giggling, and you're having fun, and just someone goes, "What?" And then all of a sudden, next time, "What?"
And so, according to Brendan, it just started echoing.
And so the roar just started echoing down the hallways. Originally, the original roar, and then eventually, people would just be playing X-Men and yelling back at the machine when it yelled at them.
So these guys are sitting there at first yelling at each other, and kind of like goofing off. One person would yell, another person would yell, kind of call and response, and then soon enough, they noticed that it wasn't just them, but it caught on to other people as well.
And eventually, after doing this for 5-10 minutes, we just hear in the distance, like someone off in the distance.
So yeah, one of these guys started repeating it to them, and it started going even from there to other parts.
And you'd hear the yell echo down the hallway. Like one person would roar, or one group of people would roar, and then, like halfway down the hall, you'd hear another group of people roar, and it'd just keep on going.
So very quickly, in fact, even by just the next day, it had already become a thing.
And that's kind of when it started to take off, because people knew what happened, and the next day, you would just hear these things throughout the day, and we thought it was hilarious.
The thing about this yell, and the reason that it started taking off so well, and I think this is something that Brendan and Craig both sort of made comments about, is the fact that it's kind of the perfect clip because everybody there knows what it comes from, even though it's like kind of a weird niche little noise that if you're outside of this context, nobody would have any idea what you're talking about. Everybody who's there at MAGfest who loves these games totally knows what it is.
Everyone knew what it was, and everyone knew where it was from.
Everybody knows what this is, right? And it's just kind of one of those super niche inside things. If you've been in an arcade, you played X-Men, you've heard the Colossus yell.
So it's sort of like this secret handshake, right? Like it's a way of saying, hey, you know what it is and I know what it is. So we're all kind of, in the same gang. It's
kind of the same thing with the Colossus yell, right? If you hear it and you go, oh, okay, I'm in the club, right?
But Brendan made a mention of something that I think I hadn't thought of before, is that it's not just like this secret handshake. There's something more to it that made it, I think, so contagious at MAGfest.
The next couple of years or whatever, people would just, occasionally as sort of a battle cry combined with a, like I'm having a really good time, people would just Colossus roar down the hallways.
And I think that that's kind of what gave this its staying power. It made it that it wasn't just like a one-time gag, is the fact that, this is something where it's kind of this way of expressing how happy you are to be there among your people. That you found everybody there. You can do that anywhere at MAGfest, and that the people who are listening, who are nearby, are going to get you. And it's something that you can't do outside of the confines of that festival. And so it's this thing where even if you're not anywhere near the game, just making this sound and having somebody repeat it back means, hey, we're all in this gang. We all know what's up. We're all in the club, Then
we went back a few years later. And I remember walking in, and it was literally as soon as I walked into the hotel, you just heard, "Run!"
I think we should all start greeting each other this way.
Especially like in church or in business meetings. Yeah. The thing is, so this yell is still going on now, and it hasn't like died off at all. And in fact, a few years ago, they even got Nobuo Uematsu. So I don't know, Brandon, if you remember that Seeley's opera that I used to make you play piano to from Final Fantasy VI. That's the one. So Nobuo Uematsu is the guy who actually wrote that song. And he's like, the probably most famous video game composer. I mean, I think his music was played by like the LA Symphony at like the Walt Disney Theater. They had him at MAGfest doing the Colossus roar on stage.
We straight up have Nobuo Uematsu doing the Colossus roar at MAGfest 10 in the middle of his set.
And if you watch it, the crowd is just going wild. And it's just such a funny, it's so funny that became this thing. So obviously these two dudes are central to this roar becoming a social meme, right? Brendan is, and Craig definitely is. And, obviously if either of them had not been part of it, I don't think it would have become the social meme it was. But I do think somehow, somewhere, it would have still surfaced. It became a thing with me and my friends, and I think it became a thing with other people that I've talked to. And actually, there's kind of a crazy story that Brendan told about after he had left MAGfest. So this is a little bit of a long clip.
Immediately after that MAGfest, that I backed away from in 2011. I went to OhioCon, and I was walking around in the hallways of some hotel there, and I hear the Colossus roar, and I was like, oh gosh, MAGfest people must be here, and I actually run down the hallway to track down, and I was like, are you the guys that were Colossus roaring? And they were like, yeah. It's like, well, who are you? Because like I run MAGfest, and I'm sure I know who you are. I've seen your name come across in registration or whatever. And they're like, MAGfest? We haven't been to MAGfest. I was like, what? Hold on. What happened here? And they were like, well, why are you asking us if we went to MAGfest? And I was like, Colossus roar, dude. Like, you just Colossus roared. That's the MAGfest thing. And they were like, oh no, we haven't been to MAGfest, but about an hour or an hour and a half from here, there's a really badass arcade, and they have the 6-player X-Men machine. And I was like, whoa, hold on. And they basically told me, they were like, we sat around playing the X-Men machine, and the Colossus roar is just an undeniable noise that comes out of this machine. And we started roaring along with it one day, and it became our battle cry. And like exactly the MAGfest story, just like some dudes at a random arcade, not at MAGfest or whatever. And that's when I had to tell them, like, this is something that happens at MAGfest, and it like echoes down the hallways at MAGfest. And
what this made me think of, and I actually think I made this comment to him, but Brandon, have you ever heard that people say that like evolution has created the crab 100,000 times throughout history? Yeah, it's like the Ordovician or the Cretaceous period. They all have their version of the crab that like evolved, went extinct, and then basically evolved the exact same way again, because the crab is like this perfect design, and nature keeps creating this perfect design that's just made for for life on this planet. I think that this kind of concept, this Colossus roar, becoming a meme around people, is like that crab. Like, it's a perfectly designed sound to get people hyped up and amped. Like you hear that that yell bursting out over the music, echoing through the arcade, and it's just something that sticks in your mind and you can never forget it. And so I think, if this ends up being somebody who is a janitor or whatever, no matter who it ends up being, it's crazy that the person who created this thing that is like, I don't know, has the ability to create memes anywhere it goes, essentially, is like uncredited. It just blows my mind.
Yeah, it seems like there's something with this game where when we were going to talk about it and, we're planning things out, like I knew that the Colossus roar was something that we love doing and it was special to us. But having talked to all these people and like, watching videos for research and stuff like that, every video has a comment. Like if a video mentions the X-Men arcade game at all, there's a comment about the Colossus roar specifically, right? Or if you go to search, there's like a video like 9 minutes of the Colossus roar straight. It's like, why does that exist? Like there's something about that sound that if you've played the game, like that sound is going to stick out to you. And I didn't really realize that it was like that for everyone. When we came in, thought it was something that was more specific to us, but there is something about it that it's universal, that if you know that game, that sound is one of the first things that sticks in your head.
I wonder if this is at all on Konami's radar. I mean, I know it's probably still pretty small potatoes for them, but the fact that there's no way they did this on purpose, but accidentally created this thing, that so many people gravitate onto when they hear this machine,
Yeah, this lightning in a bottle, right? Because all those other games from this period, Simpsons and Ninja Turtles and stuff, they're killer games, and they have funny little clips and they, funny little sound effects and stuff, but nothing that's iconic like that. Nothing that has this staying power like the Colossus roar does. And what's crazy is that this was never ported to anything. So anybody who knows that sound, it's not like they played it on like a Nintendo release that had, millions of copies sold. They had to have gone to an arcade and played it, which is even crazier to think, right? I mean, arcade cabinets were never selling anywhere near the volume that a console does, because you can sell a console game for, $50. But these games go for thousands of dollars, and they take up a ton of a ton of space. So like, you know, like the fact that that many people played it is just crazy to me.
That's true. Yeah. And you have to have an arcade nearby. That arcade has to have the cabinet. And then you have to choose Colossus as well, you know, because you could go through the game, and if you're playing as Wolverine and Cyclops and, you know, Storm, 3 people playing, and then you walk away, you never even heard the sound.
That's true. That's true. And he was not a very popular.
Yeah.
I mean, he wasn't like the most popular character either, right? Like,
yeah.
You know, if you were an X-Men fan and you went up there, you'd be like, "Oh, I'm Wolverine. Okay, I'm Cyclops." You know, and I think he wouldn't be the first choice for a lot of people. So, yeah. Well, so this doesn't get us any closer to finding our voice actor, but there is a special treat that I have for our listeners and for you, Brandon, with such a great guest as Stuttering Craig, who is the originator of the Colossus meme. We knew that we just had to take advantage of this and have a Colossus off with him. So I challenged him, and you may have noticed in the clips that I've played so far, he was very, very generous with his Colossus impressions as we were doing the interview. But yeah, we had a Colossus off, and I think that there's no better way for us to wrap up this episode than just to play that out.
Yeah, that's awesome. Let's hear it.
Wow.
So Craig, I have one last thing before we wrap it up. I feel like I would be remiss if I let you go without us having a Colossus off, because you started this whole Colossus meme, and so I think we've got to have a Colossus off now. Are you okay with that?
Nothing would make me happier to trounce your ass with the Colossus.
All right, I'll tell you what. You go first.
Okay.
Or do you want to go second?
Well, let's see. I think it's kind of like batting in baseball. It's always good to go second. But this is your home, right? So I'll go
you're
first.
The guest.
I'm the away. I'm the away team. You can go. So is this like when you say a Colossus, are there rules attached to this?
You just have to do your best impression of Colossus. And if you want, we can play a sample for you.
No, I know it.
Okay.
I hear it. It's all right here. It's all, all in my head. I got it. Are we ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. My voice is grabbing.
You can take a second chance. A second shot. Oh, that's so good. All right, let me tell you, before I do mine, we have actually talked to like one of the actors who played Colossus in the show. We talked to somebody else who redid the voices when they remade the X-Men game in 2010. Mm-hmm. We've talked to these people, and yours was better than both of theirs.
Yeah, it's funny. I have it pulled up on YouTube just now. After I did that, I actually listened to the Colossus yell, and I was like, that sounds exactly like mine.
You really nailed it. You really nailed it.
Well, let's hear it.
You're the first person who's put me on edge. All right, here I go. Ready?
Yep.
Keep in mind that it's like almost midnight here in Japan. All right, here we go.
It's pretty solid. Pretty good.
I don't know if that peaked my mic, but
it sounded great. I feel like that's. Can I go one more?
Yeah, of course.
Love it.
I think that was okay.
Craig, I think I've met my match. I really, really like. Hats off to you. I think that's a spectacular Colossus roar.
Well, I had a lot of practice.
Yeah. You know what I'm realizing too is if we find this person, their Colossus roar is not going to be as good as either of yours, because you guys have heard it so many times and done it so many times, and they probably did it once 30 years ago and haven't thought about it since.
Yes, 100%, 100%. Again, they're gonna when you find this person, right? They're gonna be like so confused as to why you wanted to find them in the first place. They probably legitimately won't even remember that they did it. Or the ultimate sadness would be that they died, right?
That's what we're worried about.
This is a cold case, and you gotta talk to their wife or something about it.
Hey, if it gets to that point, we're gonna have a seance and pull that person up from the dead and talk to them.
I love it, man. That's great. Well, I wish you guys best on your endeavor on this, and please keep me updated. It's amazing to think that we were such a small part of this this insanity that has spawned you guys into this podcast. But I love it, and I certainly need to stay updated on this process.
All right.
Awesome.
Well, we'll let you know
so
for
much.
sure.
For sure. Thank you guys. Appreciate it.
You've been listening to Searching for Grog, a podcast about fuzzy memories, family mysteries, and the video games that tie them all together. Thank you so much to Brendan Becker for coming on the show and regaling us with your stories not only about MAGfest, but about demo scene, about old hardware like the Casio Loopy, about all the fascinating topics that you brought up. For people who want to check out Brendan's awesome music, follow @InversePhase on Instagram and Twitter, and most importantly, kick him some dosh on Bandcamp. And for those listeners living in the Baltimore, Maryland area, definitely go and check out the Bloop Museum, that's BLOOP. And if you're not living in Maryland, check them out on Facebook, Instagram, wherever fine internets are sold, and most importantly, check out the Patreon. And of course, we want to give a huge thanks to Craig Skistimus, aka Stuttering Craig. Thank you for not only coming on and talking about your memories, but for creating this whole Colossus Roar meme in the first place. You can follow Craig's podcast, that's Craig Skits Pod, or just go into YouTube and type in Stuttering Craig. You won't regret it. And be sure to follow our Instagram, @SearchingForGrog, as well. We throw all kinds of bonus content on there that won't fit on the show, mostly because it's visual. If you like the show, please tell a friend. Word of mouth is the best way for us to grow. Also, like, subscribe, comment, all those things that trick the algorithm into thinking that our show is more popular than it is. Our music is by Captive Portal, except for the THX theme with the Colossus roar superimposed on top. That was by InversePhase, aka Brendan Becker. This show and everything we do is dedicated to the memory of our Nana, Barbara Belengi, and our cousin Alyssa Gunn Maldonado.
Was that not just the most fun thing ever? I mean, it was awesome. I loved everything about that. Like I said, I wanted to slice it up, but I thought giving you guys the entire story was really important. So I encourage you once again, go find the podcast. I have links down in the description and in the comments below for you. Please go follow them. It's a really good podcast. If you made it this far, you got to do it. So I hope to help with the resolution of finding who the voice actor was for the Colossus War, so we can all put a big bow on this gaming mystery. All right, you guys, thanks so much for enjoying this. I'm glad you did. Thumbs up, subscribe, all the stuff, as they say, that tricks the algorithm into thinking that this little channel is more important than it actually is. You guys have a great day. I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.